Alright guys, I'm kicking off a new series of videos for you today on building tools in Ableton, and partly this is to teach you guys how to program racks and sort of build these things in general, but also the general philosophy behind this is getting out as much of the friction in the workflow as you can so that you can create as much art in as short of a period of time as possible, right? So one thing that you'll want to do often is automate volume changes, right? And the problem with that is the way that a lot of people will tend to do it is they'll automate their fader, and you don't really want to do that. Right? And the reason you don't want to do that is if I were to do this, so let's just hit record. Right? So you can see all these changes, these automation changes for this volume. The problem with that is if I just want to tweak the whole level of this track and I'm just saying, oh man, this is good, but this track really needs to be a little bit more quiet. Now, you could just slap a utility on this after the fact and then do it that way and make these little changes with a utility. But I find it's actually better to make the automation lanes by automating the utilities gain as opposed to the fader gain, because that way when you're mixing down all these different tracks, you don't have to dive into every single track and find where the utility is and make these little balance changes of like a tenth of a decibel here, a tenth of a decibel there on that track, right? And so leaving all of your faders without automation, right? So delete automation, leaving all your faders without automation makes the end balancing a lot better, and then doing all the automations in a utility is just cleaner. Now, this tool is designed to help you do that in a more effective way. So what you'll notice is this, it's already 2 decibels up, and 2 decibels is a lot, right? When you're trying to be subtle about things, sometimes all you need is like a half decibel of gain over the course of a couple bars, or like a decibel of gain total, right? So what I like to do is build what I call a gain automator, and it's just a series of utilities. So this is a really, really simple technique, but it's just a series of utilities. What we're going to do is we're going to group a bunch of these utilities together. We're going to turn off the bass mono and everything, so it's just a turn off the DC offset, right? So it's just a very, very simple utility. We're going to group these, right? So you can press Control G to group these into a chain, right? And there's a couple ways to go about it, but the short of it is we're going to have these all mapped to different macros, and we're going to change the calibration of these gains, right? So what I like to do is I like to right, so this would be like minus 1.5, right? Or we'll call it plus and minus 1.5 decibels, right? And so what I would do is I would take that and I would say this goes to minus 1.5 and this goes to 1.5, right? This one would be like 3 decibels, right? And I would have this go from minus 3 to 3, right? And then I would have, another one, for instance, that would be at 6. So I've already made one of these things, a couple of them actually, right? So I've got this one, which is, it's big in that you can see that there's 2 ones that will go from minus 0.5 to 0.5. And so when you're automating this, if you just want to make subtle changes, it's fine, right? It's very easy to do because like this is just 3 decibels from here. It's not like 60 decibels or whatever. So you get a lot more resolution to control. And then you've also got a lot of automation lanes. So if you've been automating this volume and then you're like, well, I like this, but I just want to sculpt it slightly. Instead of changing that, you can be like, okay, it just needs to build a little bit more during this period of time, but I like this up and down motion that it's doing. It just should build a little bit more over that time. Right, so to take this whole thing and add a little bit more of an upward motion throughout it, it's kind of difficult, right? You need to like tilt this up a little bit and then this up, and I'm already ruining my curves, right? So if I have another lane to automate, then I can just do that. And so I've got 2 that are plus 3, minus 3, 2 that are plus, 1.5, minus 1.5. These are 6. This is 12, and this goes minus 18 to infinity. And I'm actually going to rename this mute, because the other functionality is sometimes you just want to mute things entirely, right? Just like have it go to silence immediately. And so if you do that, then all you need to do is take this and be like, okay, this is just going to be muted right now, right? And so, this would be, let's throw this down. Right, and maybe I have some big crash or something coming here. And I might have many tracks and I just want to mute some of these tracks just for a second, right? And then bring them back in. So you could just mute them really, really quick, right? So that's the gist of this. You have all these automation lanes, and utilities don't really take up very much processing power. And if they're not being automated, they basically take up no processing power. So it's not really resource intensive to have a lot of these, but just in case, I made a light version because sometimes you don't need as much. And so this just has one lane that goes plus 1.5, minus 1.5. This is 3, 6, and then this is the very coarse, which again I would call this mute. But this I calibrated to go from plus 18 to minus infinity, right? So you can look in the mappings. It's just like I told you. This also, since I had other macro knobs, I just threw on a switch to turn this into turning the bass mono, and you'll notice it also controls the frequency under which it converts to mono. And so you crank this up and it turns on, right? That happens. See this one? The way that this works is if you have the low number on the left and the high number on the right, it's going to be on anywhere that it's in between these two numbers. Now you can actually switch these and put the high number on the right. That'll reverse the behavior and it will turn on whenever you are outside of the range from 84 to 15. Most people don't know that. Most people who do this, they actually know that it's on when it's in between the range, but most people don't know that you can have it turn on when it's outside of the range, right? So I set this to 1. Sometimes I'll set it to 0.1, and it looks like it says 0, but if you're all the way off, where's that bass mono? Yeah, so if you're all the way off, you'll notice that it still turns off, but even if you press shift up just to turn this a little bit, it turns on immediately. So if you're trying to get as much of a range out of this knob, like as much of a frequency range as possible, you could turn the on off of this switch, right, which is this mapping right here. But you could turn that to 0.1 instead of 1. I have it at 1 because in this case I don't need the extra range, right? It turns on when the frequency's at like 55 or something. If I'm going to use this, I'm probably going to have my bass be mono below about 120 hertz or even 150, right? But that's all it is, right? So it's just a bunch of utilities macroed, and then we calibrate these macro ranges so that we have this fine calibrated automation. We've got a slightly more coarse automation, right? Like say if I want to just cut 3 decibels before a drop, I would just slap this on there, right? And honestly, once I start mixing down my track, this goes on basically every one of my tracks, right? Because they're all being automated a little bit at different points for different reasons. This is just the best way to do it. So instead of throwing a utility on, I just throw on a stack of utilities that have these macro knobs pre-calibrated, right? And so then, I've got all these extra automation lanes to do all these little tweakings, right? I can like have it coarse where it's going up plus 18 or all the way down to minus 12 or whatever. No, this really ought to be plus 12 to minus 12. But anyways, I'm going to leave these links in the description for you to download and reverse engineer. It's very easy to make, so you can probably just make it yourself. And I encourage you to do that, but I'm going to leave these for you as a free download. All right, guys, I love you so much. I'm going to do a lot more videos on rack programming and ways to make these tools that will just make your production sessions fly by and just get a lot more done. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope if you're new to rack programming, that it gets your brain working on how you can iron out all the wrinkles and friction in your production process by building little tools like this for tasks that you do often, right? And you want to look at any tasks you do often and be like, is there a way that I could make it so it's going to take me even 10, 15 less seconds every time I do this. Because if you do that all over your production process, you're going to save hours and hours every session, I promise. All right, guys, love you. Take care.